it was going to cost something to get in here. Hopefully there's a lot to see. Closes at 4:30 daily. Wow, that's elaborate. When Wall Street fell in 1929, the banking crisis began, which was the beginning of the end for the Hoover administration.
With the perspective of time, we might ask how many of the veterans really deserved or needed a preferential bonus denied to other citizens, or to what degree the Army went beyond Hoover's instructions in pacifying the unarmed protesters. Similarly, while the Great Depression began in the first year of Hoover's presidency, as Secretary of Commerce under President Calvin Coolidge, Hoover himself had warned against abuses and weaknesses in banking and the stock market. Hoover had been extremely successful at mobilizing private charities to aid disaster victims, and at first viewed the Depression as only another such temporary calamity. Like most of his generation, he could not foresee how this event would revolutionize the role government played in the lives of all Americans. His wealth of innovative proposals and programs to combat the Depression are often overlooked because an unsympathetic Congress failed to pass most of them. Many became instead the basis for his successor, Franklin Roosevelt's much-heralded New Deal. In opposing direct aid to suffering Americans except as a last resort, Hoover was nothing more or less than a man of his times. The government had never done that sort of thing, and most politicians, including Roosevelt, advocated a balanced budget and shuddered at the idea of a government dole. Could any president have turned the country around in so short a time? In fact, it took the activity of World War II to end the Depression. And who could say how much greater the damage and suffering might have been had a man with less energy and fortitude been elected president in 1928?
I carry the brand of Iowa, said Herbert Hoover, recalling the experience of a 5-year-old barefoot boy stepping on a chip of hot iron in his father's blacksmith shop. In many ways, Hoover never shed the stamp of his Quaker upbringing in West Branch, Iowa, where he was born August 10, 1874. His father, Jesse, combined Quaker piety with a very American desire to get ahead in the world. Jesse's wife, Huldah, was a sweet-faced, devout woman who took Herbert, his brother Theodore, and his sister May to the unheated meeting house. Bert sat quietly, sometimes for hours, as his elders waited for the friend's inner light to move them to speak. Very debonair-looking Hoover. Says he is 30. He's trying to look 35, but he's only 23. Hoover's first job out of college was shoveling ore in a Nevada City, California mine. His pay, $2 per 10-hour shift. By spring of 1897, the London firm of Bewick Mooring was looking for a geologist at least 35 years old and with a lifetime of experience. Hoover fudged his age and bought a tweed dress suit to look older. Soon he found himself in the vast, arid Australian outback, where there was more gold than water, and the temperature often topped 100 degrees at midnight. He put away the dress suit. In rough-hewn settlements like Coolgardie, Kalgoorlie, and Lenora, the 23-year-old Yankee nicknamed Hail Columbia, Hoover won the trust of rowdy Aussies by taking his take-charge ways and democratic habits, bathing in beer instead of water, living on a diet of sardines and cocoa. Hoover rode a camel through the sprawling wastes of Western Australia looking for gold. One day he scouted out a rich vein which he persuaded his London employers to purchase for $1 million. In time, the famed Sons of Gawala mine would return $65 million to Bewick Mooring. In the spring of 1898, Hoover's salary was raised to $10,000 a year. His men bestowed a new title on the youthful American, the Chief. It stuck, and Hoover would be called this for the rest of his life. So did memories of wild and woolly Australia, a land of red dust, black flies, and white heat. Sounded like he had a tough, adventurous streak. At the ripe age of 24, Herbert Hoover went to China to develop coal mines and build port facilities. On his arrival, however, Chinese officials told him to find gold fast. Huya and Hulu, Bert and Lou's Chinese names, found themselves in a land only reluctantly opening its doors to Western technology and expertise. Hoover's exalted status forced him to travel in state with hundreds of mules, ponies, soldiers, and a translator whose fractured English led him to announce each bit of bad news with the phrase that soon became his nickname, "Really damn." Rumors soon spread of a great foreign mandarin whose green eyes allowed him to see through the ground to find gold. Hoover did battle with bedbugs and a manager who smoked opium until he was pale. He met a living Buddha who rode a bicycle around a Tibetan lamasery. One Christmas day, he taught the game of football to a crowd of barefooted children. Early in 1900, a wave of anti-Western feeling swept China. Peking reformers were overthrown, and a nativist group calling itself Ai-Ho-Tan, or the Boxers, laid siege to the Western colony in Tientsin. Herbert and Lou Hoover were trapped along with other Westerners. They built barricades of sacks of rice and grain. Hulu rode her bicycle close to walls to avoid bullets. One evening, while playing solitaire, an artillery shell crashed into the house, sending debris everywhere. Lou went on playing as if nothing had happened. Another morning, she read her obituary in a California newspaper. 10 weeks after the siege began, help arrived in dramatic fashion, said Hoover. I do not remember a more satisfying musical performance than the bugles of the American Marines entering the settlement playing "There'll Be a Hot Time in the Old Town Tonight."
Unending public chores, former President Hoover was anything but retired. For the last 25 years of his life, Hoover lived here, in Suite 31A of New York's elegant Waldorf Towers. He rose each morning at 7, then planted himself at a desk in the living room depicted here, where he would work up to 10 hours a day on books, articles, government reports, and a vast correspondence with the American people. Here he met distinguished visitors, including Presidents Truman, Kennedy, and Nixon, and wide-eyed children from the boys' clubs of America. Late in the afternoon, Hoover interrupted his literary chores for a cocktail hour, known as the pause between the errors and trials of the day and hopes of the night. Hoover couldn't abide eating alone, and his dinner table featured lively talk of politics and public affairs. The old man was in bed by 9, unless there was a baseball game on television, like this color set he watched during the last weeks of his life. Television had come of age since he, as Secretary of Commerce, had lent his face to the medium's pioneer broadcast in 1927. In the 1950s, the relaxed elder statesman appeared live on national public affairs programs.
This gentleman is the former President of the United States, Herbert Hoover. We'll call on him at his winter home, the Key Largo Anglers Club in Florida. I'm Charles Collingwood. The name of the program is Person to Person.
Hoover displayed an undiminished intelligence and a wry sense of humor.
Do you agree with those who say that former presidents ought to be given a seat in the Senate, Mr. Hoover?
Mr. Collingwood, 20 years ago, I would have been enthusiastic about that. But it's my time of life. I don't look on the prospect of sitting on a hard cushion for several hours a day and listening to speeches as being very attractive.
In an exchange with a worried reporter, he affirmed his faith that America would survive the Cold War crisis, presumably as it had the earlier Great Depression.
I would like to ask you if you think that we are working hard enough in this country, and if we have enough determination and will to stand against the Soviet Union.
My feeling is that we have involved ourselves in too many crises, and that our major job today is to clean up our own household. That if we are in more imminent dangers from internal causes than we are from the Cold War.
Which causes are you referring to, sir?
Well, we're fast drifting into inflation, unbalanced budgets, overspending by Congress, the huge growth of crime. I don't know, there are half a dozen different things that infest the public mind with worry, anxiety, that need to be cleaned up at home.
Have these things weakened us so much that we can't stand out strong against Russia?
No, I wouldn't want anybody to think for a moment that the American people are not capable of solving any crisis. As a matter of fact, this nation is now in its 183rd year, and it has lasted longer than any representative government. It has gone through 7 wars. It's gone through 3 Great Depressions. It's had some bad administrations in Washington. It's fallen on evil days in every one of the wars which we fought, which produced a series of crises. And yet, after all that, we still have of the original heritage of the American people a very large part of what the forefathers established. We still have a freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom of enterprise within the limits of some socialist attack, freedom of speech within the limits of a very mild laws on the subject. Generally, we possess today the same vitality, the genius, the initiative, and the ability to solve these crises that we have in the past. We need to be more diligent on the job.
The passage of time has only made Herbert Hoover seem an even wiser man.
So just in the back, basically the backyard of the Hoover Presidential Library is the National Park Service President Hoover Park, I suppose you would say. Here you can see where he was born, where he lived, what things looked like here when he was just a child, where he started life out at. It's almost a little town of itself. From Downey Street to Pennsylvania Avenue, as it's called. Let's see what kind of goodies they have for us here of a historical nature. Herbert Clark Hoover was born August 10th, 1874 in this two-room cottage. He spent his early boyhood years on the edge of the village, surrounded by farmlands. His parents, relatives, and many neighbors were Quakers whose daily lives were centered on their religious beliefs. Herbert's mother, Huldah, tended to him and his siblings, Theodore and Mary. She also served as a recorded minister in a Quaker meeting. Jesse, a devoted father, worked hard as a blacksmith and businessman. Together they played major roles in forming the character of the boy who would become the 31st President of the United States. My grandparents and parents came here in a covered wagon. The most formative years of my boyhood were spent here. My roots are in this soil. Quote from Herbert Hoover. Here's some of the inside of where Hoover was born, President Hoover, that is. Wood-burning stove. Kind of get a sense of just how small the house was. Cellar, I would say, storm cellar or otherwise, or other things. What have we here? There's not a sign on it saying you can't turn it. Let's see what happens. Must be a little dry here. There's no water. Neat contraption, though. Little garden. Clothesline. There's a lot more to this place than meets the eye. If you read about this see it on a map, or if you see a little blurb about it, the written word doesn't do it justice. It's really a place that you need to stop in and see if you like history and Americana. It's all right here. This is looking down the Downey Street area. Some of the homes. This little area, this place is just fascinatingly beautiful, if that's even a word. But it kind of takes your vocabulary away when you come across something that's looks like it's frozen in time. Just a beautiful place, great place to visit. Just kind of scope this out while we're walking. Visit the West Branch Commercial Historic District, just a block up the street. Buildings from the late 1800s and early 1900s, now listed in the National Historical Register of Historic Places, show how downtown West Branch changed from modest wood structures to a thriving business center with ornate brick buildings. As a boy, Herbert Hoover walked up Downey Street, then the North Main South Road, and this Main North-South Road in and out of town to attend school, run errands, and visit his father's farm implement store on Main Street. Iowa certainly doesn't disappoint in its beauty and its people and all the things here that are just so interesting and wholesome to learn about. This must be the blacksmith shop. Jesse Hoover, blacksmith. President's father, of course. Here you can see some of the tools of the trade, just as it would have been in the 1870s. Wow, what a table saw. So let's see what we've learned today. Things I didn't know about President Hoover after visiting the presidential library was the fact that he actually proposed a $50 a month pension to senior citizens before there ever was a Social Security Administration. Who knew? That's never reported. I've always thought Franklin Roosevelt administration started Social Security, but it was proposed by Hoover, but it was not passed by Congress. And when the Great Depression began, Roosevelt was probably able to ramrod a lot of those measures through Congress because of the national emergency that was going on at the time. The television interview with Hoover from the 60s, I just found it amazing how you could just change the years on that, and the things he was concerned about in American society are exactly what we're dealing with today. Just an amazing way that history repeats itself. Hope y'all enjoyed this tour of the Hoover Presidential Library as much as I did, and follow us on down the road.